Hej och välkomna tillbaka till Erik Pensers banks Temadag Särläkemedel. Nu har jag äran att presentera Søren Tulstrup från Hansa Biopharma som ska köra en presentation. Kör hårt.
Tack. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to join you today. It's always great to be in Stockholm. I've chosen to give my presentation in English. I've learned that in Sweden, Danish is considered a disease rather than a language, which is probably true. So I'll do it in English. Before I start, let me just point you to the fact that my presentation today will contain forward-looking statements, and as such, you should apply appropriate caution. Now, I'm sure that many of you are not totally familiar with the Hansa Biopharma case, and so here's a brief overview and summary of the company and its background. Hansa was founded back in 2007 as a spin-out from Lund University, and what led to the foundation of the company was the discovery of an enzyme, today known as imlifidase, that has the unique property that it very fast and effectively cleaves immunoglobulin G, which is one of the most common components in the human immune system. And it was thought that that could have therapeutic relevance in a number of therapeutic areas. Initially, the founders and the early-stage investors wanted the company to focus on developing imlifidase as a drug candidate to potentially enable kidney transplants in so-called highly sensitized patients. These are patients that, because of a previous transplant, blood transfusion, or multiple pregnancies, have had their immune system primed, and therefore it's very difficult for them to find an organ that is a good enough fit to carry through with the transplant. If you then fast forward 13, 14 years, arriving at 2020 last year, the company actually succeeded in getting this drug candidate approved in Europe, conditionally approved for that indication, which is very exciting. But 2020 was also a remarkable year in the history of the company in other ways. We generated proof of concept in the first of what we hope will be many autoimmune diseases. These are diseases where the immune system attacks the body's own cells and tissue. And we got that in a disease called anti-GBM, which also affects the kidney. And we moved then. This was the second pillar then, so transplantation is the first, autoimmune diseases is the second. Now we have proof of concept there. The third pillar of the company is gene therapy, where based on very promising preclinical data showing that imlifidase can wipe out the so-called neutralizing antibodies that prevent a broad range of patients from benefiting from modern gene therapy. And based on the data set generated there, we entered into a collaboration with a US-based company called Sarepta Therapeutics. And so now we're also active in the gene therapy space. And the fourth pillar really of the company, as we see it, is oncology. And here we're still at work doing preclinical work. So this truly is a platform company, even though, of course, right now there's a lot of focus on the lead asset, Idefirix, for kidney transplantation. And here we see a large potential. We'll discuss that. The launch is happening as we speak. I'm sure there will be questions around that. From an organizational perspective, we've grown quite a lot. When I joined the company back in 2018, we were 35 people. Now we are 130-something. And even though it's a young organization, it's a very experienced organization with an average tenure in the industry of more than 20 years of each of our employees. We are listed here in Stockholm, as you probably know, of course. We have half of our shareholder base is Swedish. We're very thankful for the support we're getting. And we most recently raised capital back in 2020. We raised $121 million, and with that and existing cash, we're now funded into 2023. So that was a brief snapshot of the company. So as I said, clearly right now, there's a lot of focus on the lead asset and the fact that we're launching Idefirix in Europe. But we're so much more than Idefirix, and we're so much more than a single asset play in transplantation. We are truly a platform company in the immunology space. And so we think that with our platform and the skills that we bring, the knowledge we have in the organization, we can play a significant role in achieving our vision, which is a world where patients with rare immunologic diseases can lead long and healthy lives. Our mission in connection with this vision is to leverage our unique enzyme technology platform to develop innovative and life-saving, potentially life-altering immunomodulating therapies, bring these to the patients with rare diseases who need them, and generate value to society at large. So we're not about developing Me Too products, and we really want our products to reach the end user, the patients, with the desired outcomes. That's a very lofty and ambitious mission. Is there any reason to believe that we can deliver? And I would say that just looking at our lead asset, Idefirix, yes, there is reason to believe that we can deliver. Already through our phase 2 trials, we have enabled kidney transplants in 46 patients. That's a 100% success rate in enabling kidney transplants in these difficult to treat patients that are on dialysis. And dialysis, as you probably know, is essentially a death sentence. More than 50% of all patients are dead after 5 years, and obviously it's a horrible quality of life. So getting them off of dialysis through a transplant is really life-saving and life-altering. Obviously now we need to move beyond the phase 2 patients, and this is what we're doing through the commercialization of our product. We've also started to deliver value to society, or at least indicate that we can deliver such value to society. We're now reimbursed in a number of European countries, including Sweden, and the TLV Institute under the NT-rådet has concluded, based on an extensive health technology assessment, that using Idefirix at the price in Sweden is at least cost-effective and potentially even a cost saving for the system. So think about that. A product that is a lifesaver potentially, and certainly a product that can alter the lives of patients, can potentially even save money for society. That is something you see very rarely within rare diseases and orphan drugs. So I think that is a great way to get off this product from the ramp. And now, of course, we need to do similar things with other products in our pipeline: Guillain-Barré syndrome, anti-GBM, AMR, etc. So the past couple of years have been really full of achievements and very exciting despite the pandemic. We don't have too much time today, so don't want to go through all of this, but we've raised capital. We've entered into a number of different collaboration agreements. I mentioned Sarepta in the gene therapy space already. We've also entered into a collaboration with Argenx. And we have gotten Idefirix approved and reimbursed in a number of countries. We've also been certified as a great place to work, actually 2 years in a row now. So we have not only a very experienced and qualified staff, but also highly motivated staff that is very proud of where they work. So we have a platform that can be used in a number of different therapeutic areas. Let me just briefly show one slide and talk about the platform. It is a series of enzymes that all share the commonality that they cleave IgG, and they do that just below the so-called hinge section, creating a Fab2 and an Fc component. That happens instantly, and so within a couple of hours from a 15-minute infusion, you see IgG levels drop down below detectable levels, and then they stay down there for approximately 7 days before gradually bouncing back, and then within a couple of months, you're back to normal. Imlifidase is derived from a human pathogen, Streptococcus pyogenes, and it's very effective. It's also well tolerated, but since it comes from a human pathogen, it is immunogenic, and therefore, even though a number of patients may tolerate repeated doses, we are also developing another series of enzymes for repeat dosing scenarios. But just looking at one-off dosing, as you can see from this slide here, there's really a number of different growth trajectories for this product. In the transplantation space, we're already active with the kidney, both pre and post-transplantation. But beyond the kidney, obviously, there is lung, heart, bone marrow transplantations where you have similar issues with highly sensitized patients having a hard time finding organs and being transplanted. In the autoimmune disease space, as I mentioned, we have proof of concept in anti-GBM. We are already active with a phase 2 trial in another disease driven by IgG called Guillain-Barré syndrome, affecting the peripheral nerve system. And beyond these two, there are other similar IgG-driven autoimmune diseases that are monophasic, essentially, or where there's just one or very few very serious attacks. In the gene therapy space, through our collaboration with Sarepta, we are working in the area of neuromuscular dystrophies, specifically limb-girdle and Duchenne. But beyond those, I mean, there are more than 200 programs in the gene therapy space, preclinically and clinical stage. And so there's a number of different expansion opportunities. Most programs today use AAV vectors to get the healthy gene into the cells, and that's where the problem with neutralizing antibodies come from. Then in the repeat dosing space, with NICER, our next generation enzymes, obviously there is a number of applications potentially in the gene therapy space. Repeat dosing of gene therapy may be necessary in many situations. In transplantation, again, you can have a need prior to a transplant, but also post-transplantation with episodes of rejection where repeat dosing is necessary. In the autoimmune disease space, there are relapses in chronic autoimmune diseases where you need efficacy beyond what you get from the maintenance therapy. And then oncology is almost by definition a repeat dosing space. With so many different expansion opportunities, it's very important to have a clear business model. And this we have, at the core of this, we have our enzymes, as you can see to the left-hand side of the slide. And then as we move through the value chain to the end user, the patient, through distribution, we really want to retain control of the value chain elements. We don't necessarily need to own them, but we want to retain control because we want our products to be optimally used, and we also want to get an appropriate share of the economic upside that we're generating. Then as we get to the launch stage, our model bifurcates depending on whether it's spaces where we think, most of the resources needed to successfully launch, and where you have concentrated target audiences, like in transplantation and many autoimmune diseases, or we need access to complementary assets, like in gene therapy or oncology, and where it's pretty complex to operate, where we would want to work with partners, as we have done now, at least initially, with Sarepta in the gene therapy space. And then we have multiple income streams, ranging from revenue, of course, upfront payments, milestone payments, and royalties. Many different opportunities, a clear business model. We also have very clear strategic priorities. Right now, of course, we're launching, so there's a lot of focus on that. But our number one priority, or at least the one that's listed first here, is really to advance our platform overall in new indications and therapeutic areas. And to help that, we have created 4 franchises that own the business in transplantation, autoimmunity, gene therapy, and oncology. We certainly want to make a success out of the launch of Idefirix. We really see a tremendous commercial potential. And here we need to do it first, of course, in Europe, but also move into countries where you can use the European approval to get fast approval. There are geographies outside of Europe where that is possible. And in the US, we have aligned with the FDA around a study that will run. I'm sure we will discuss that hopefully will qualify us to submit a BLA under the accelerated approval process. So getting that study done and getting an approval in the US is also a key priority of ours. And then finally, we need to continue building the organization and strengthening our skills and competences within immunology, and also build a somewhat larger commercial infrastructure. We have the core infrastructure in place. We don't need to expand it a lot, but we will do that as we expand our footprint geographically. And then we will continue to create new partnerships and occupy a central position in the R&D and commercialization ecosystem. Let me talk a little bit about Idefirix in kidney transplantation, our lead assets. So if you look at Europe, and it's essentially the same in the US, there are approximately 100,000 patients on the wait list, or at least there should be. In Europe, it's around 80,000. In some countries, patients are not put on the wait list unless it's thought that there is a reasonable chance that they will actually be transplanted. So there is self-censorship. But let's say 100,000 patients should be on the wait list. Approximately 10 to 15% of those are what we call highly sensitized, meaning that they have a what is called a CPRA rate of more than 80%, which again means that more than 80% of organs available would not be a good fit for them. and that's the target for Idefirix. And we're specifically looking at those where it's highly unlikely that they will ever be transplanted. Then the specific indication is that this is for transplant scenarios where there is an organ from a deceased donor, and here you only have up to 48 hours to essentially find a recipient. So there the medical need is really the highest. The fact that there are 80 to 100,000 on the wait list doesn't mean that in Europe those patients are transplanted. Only 1 in 5 or so are transplanted, given an undersupply of organs. And not surprisingly, the big European countries is where the majority of the volume is on a per country basis. But also Scandinavia, Switzerland, the Netherlands are important markets. And as you can see, rest of Europe is more than 3,000 transplants. And the majority of the transplants are from deceased donors. So this gives you an indication of the relevant patient population for this indication. Looking at the providers, the clinics, it's a very concentrated target audience. So this is why we think we can do it successfully. In fact, we're convinced we can do it successfully without establishing an army of sales people or medical people. Looking at Sweden, 4 centers, Denmark 3, Norway just 1, Finland just 1. In the big European countries, the top 5 clinics represent 70 to 80% of the total kidney transplant volume. So it is a very concentrated target audience. And we're doing this sequentially with early launch countries where you have access sooner than in later launch countries, typically the Mediterranean countries. So we have these different waves. Wave 1, early launch countries, then later launch countries, rest of the world. And this is not kind of sequential necessarily, but there are countries in the rest of the world, Middle East, some countries in Latin America, some in Asia Pacific that are very important. And we're certainly doing what we can to also access this market as soon as we can. And then we have the US, and here the timing is BLA submission, hopefully in 2024 is what we've guided. Here we see our pipeline. As I said, we're truly a platform company, not just at the research stage, but also the development stage. We have a pipeline of valuable drug candidates in the transplant space. I've mentioned what we have right now. This is focusing on the kidney. We have 2 ongoing trials in autoimmune diseases, anti-GBM and Guillain-Barré syndrome. Anti-GBM, here we have concluded a phase 2 trial with very encouraging results, and I talked to that. Next step is to agree with the FDA and the EMA on the next step for this product. Guillain-Barré syndrome, we have an ongoing phase 2 trial right now. We're recruiting patients. We aim to include 30 patients, and we hope to have this fully recruited by the end of the year or first half of next year. And in AMR, which is a post-transplant indication, we're also enrolling patients with a target of 30. And again, we hope to have it fully enrolled no later than first half of next year, just as Guillain-Barré syndrome. And then we have a number of preclinical projects ongoing with our partners and within Hansa Biopharma itself. So we're pretty busy right now. Again, back to the platform view. As you can see, again, at the core, we have imlifidase. We have other enzymes, the nicer enzymes around it, but we also have imlifidase in combination with other IgG reducing approaches like FcRn inhibitors. And here we have a collaboration ongoing with Argenx. And then we have the different expansion spaces, autoimmune diseases, transplantation, gene therapy, and oncology with a large number of potential indications. So I'm truly excited to be part of a company with this kind of a expansion route in different corners of the world. Just to give you an indication of the potential of the different indications, so this is looking at autoimmune diseases. There's a number of different indication spaces here, and we've just picked 4 in let's say, the kidney area. Anti-GBM, this is an ultra-rare disease with approximately 1,000 patients between the US and Europe on an annual basis. It's a very serious disease. 2 out of 3 lose their kidney function very quickly after an attack. And there's no approved therapy in this space, so it's a very interesting indication, albeit it's an ultra-rare one. But there are other IgG-driven diseases or diseases where IgG plays a major role in the disease pathology, like lupus nephritis, ANCA-associated vasculitis. Then there's neurological disorders. We're already active with Guillain-Barré syndrome. But again, there are others where IgG plays a role, like myasthenia gravis, for instance, and NMO. Skin disorders, blood disorders, you can see the numbers here. There's very, very significant potential in the autoimmune disease space. Gene therapy area is another area that we're very excited about. As I said, lots of programs ongoing. The majority of these programs use AAV as the vector to get the healthy gene into the cells. Because it's a virally based vector. Many patients, depending on the specific AAV vector used, many patients have neutralizing antibodies against this vector. Depending on the specific one, up to 70% or so have it, and that's a major challenge for the gene therapy companies. They try to find workarounds, but so far not successfully. We think, based also on specific data generated even in monkey studies, that imlifidase can create an environment where the transduction actually can take place. So that's very exciting, and we're hard at work moving forward here. Many different programs would be eligible for this type of preconditioning therapy. We're active with Sarepta in limb-girdle and Duchenne, but there's a number of other diseases where you have these issues with the vectors used. So tremendous growth opportunity also for Hansa Biopharma. So I think this leads me to the end of my presentation, hopefully leaving enough time for questions. Hopefully you've seen that, yes, we are launching right now. Initially, we were focused on this product that we're launching, Idefirix for kidney transplantation, but we are so much more than that. There's a lot of excitement around it. There is tremendous potential, but we are hard at work really exploiting our platform to become a leading player in rare diseases in the immunology space. We definitely think we have what it takes. We have significant validation, clinical, external, regulatory validation. We have manufacturing set up. We have very strong IPR, an exciting pipeline, and certainly a very exciting and strong team. And we are well underway to achieve a number of key milestones in the near future. So with this, I think I will thank you and give the mic back to you for questions.
Thank you, Søren, for a great presentation. Very interesting. So my first question is regarding commercialization in Europe. What was the rationale going on your own here in this market?
So the rationale really is, A, we can do it. It's a very concentrated target audience. So we're looking at double-digit number of clinics. B, we think we're better at doing it than anyone else because we know this molecule, we have all the data. We have worked very closely with the clinics developing it. And so what we're doing is we're going clinic by clinic with kind of a SWAT team consisting of medical people and commercial people. And so far, we've certainly been able to execute. We had a launch symposium with 120 key opinion leaders and heads of clinics just before summer. There's a lot of excitement and interest so far. But it will take time. And it's important for people to understand when you launch a transformative therapy, you should not expect a launch curve like this. We will have to build the infrastructure, create the awareness, change the mindset from not thinking about these highly sensitized patients as real candidates for a transplant to actually considering them for this, making sure that they are offered organs and so on. So there's a lot of things that you need to do.
Yeah, all right. And going on over to patient selection, you're very clear that you really want to you want the clinicians to have a very good experience. You want to choose the right patients. But who are these right patients, and when are you planning on launching in the broader patient segment?
Yeah.
If you can elaborate a bit.
Absolutely, good question. So it's been very important for us to initially focus on the patients with the highest degree of unmet medical need, because this will allow us and has allowed us to actually get market approval based on phase 2 data. And obviously demonstrate that in this segment we can really create major change, right? So we're focused on the patients that are really very highly sensitized, but obviously we also want to make sure that the outcomes are generally positive. So there are highly sensitized patients that are more qualified and will benefit more than others, right? So that's important for us. But that's not our choice, of course. That's the clinics. But that is initially the focus, to make sure that these patients, where they would benefit clearly enormously from getting an organ, giving their health status and prognosis and so on, and they have this one thing preventing them qualifying, and that's the degree of sensitization. If we can just wipe that out, that would provide a major value to these patients and of course society. Then typically what you see over time is a broader range of patients will qualify, right? So that will happen. You'll see some label expansion and so on. But right now we're focused on the most highly sensitized patients.
And is there like a point in time where you believe that you will launch it in the broader? What do you want to see?
Well, we need to see traction, right? Yeah. We need to see that, and we look at it on a clinic basis. So we're looking at repeat business, not at the patient level, because this is typically, hopefully for most patients, a one-off thing, right? But for the clinics, it's important that we see repeat business there. They need to feel comfortable that this actually works. Once you see that and you see growth in individual clinics, then you're getting ready to potentially expand the patient population a little bit.
And is this also important for your other indications, that you have a positive experience in kidney transplantation?
Yeah, clearly before moving into lung and heart and so on. There may be, I mean, sometimes that happens when a product is available, there will be off-label usage, right? But certainly for us to promote and to generate the data, we need to see traction in the kidney.
Yeah. And you mentioned label extension. How are you working with this currently? Are you planning on initiating any studies to go for living donors, for example?
Certainly something we're considering. At this point in time, it's not advanced, right? I mean, we have enough to look at right now. But clearly, I mean, there is interest, and not just driven by us. I mean, many clinics and people think about this, because obviously, if you have a relative who is willing to donate a kidney to you, and the only thing preventing that from actually happening is the fact that you're not compatible, right? It's obvious that it would be great to just wipe that out and make sure that that actually happens. Even though today there are other remedies like plasma exchange and so on that can be used, but it's not optimal. Yeah,
right. And your commercial sales force in Europe, could you just briefly say, like, how many is it in Europe? How many are in the commercial sales force? And also, what's the process of setting it up? How do you work with this? What are the first positions coming in? And can you elaborate? It's interesting to hear.
Absolutely. So it's given the fact that the number of clinics we're targeting is limited, double-digit. We're looking at a double-digit number of people, essentially, over time, even. And initially, what you put in place is territory managers that have the full responsibility in a given geography, typically one or a number of different countries. And they work hand in hand with medical personnel as well, some from our medical department, because this is really highly scientific and data-driven, right? So it's truly a team effort. Fortunately, we've been able to attract really experienced people, because not a lot has happened in the transplant space over the past decades. Very few new innovative therapies have been approved. So there are people who worked in this space for a long time, and they haven't had exciting products to deal with. So we've been able to attract some very good people.
Right. And you also aim to establish a sales force in the US. Could you just reason the differences between commercialization of a drug in Europe compared to the US? What are the key?
I would say the main difference really is that it's more complex and fragmented in Europe compared to the US. So you have to have a more kind of country-specific approach in Europe, and there are many different cultures and approaches and regulatory authorities. In the US, it is one big country, if you will, even though there are different cultures and so on. So in the US, the difference really is between the centers rather than the regions and so on. In Europe, it's between countries very much.
Right. And in March, you announced a preclinical collaboration with argenx for your enzymes to explore a combination treatment.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about this collaboration and when we can expect data from this?
Yeah, we think that, and I'm often asked that question, argenx has a number of so-called FcRn inhibitors, the most advanced of which is called efgartigimod. And they also reduce IgG, but it happens kind of gradually. It takes at least a week to get down to the lowest level, and that level is 20 to 30% of the starting level. Great in many situations, but obviously we have a different profile where we just knock it down immediately. So we think the two are complementary, and Argenx has a similar thinking here. So we're now doing preclinical work looking at how we could potentially combine the two to create better outcomes for patients suffering from autoimmune diseases or in the transplant space. And once we're comfortable with the preclinical work, we'll hopefully agree on the next step in the clinical space.
Right. And does it involve imlifidase or the next generation? And
right now, it's focused on imlifidase, but there are of course no reason why, if the concept works, that it shouldn't also be considered for other enzymes.
Right, right. And speaking about AMR and GBS, you've said that these are potentially pivotal trials, the phase 2 trials. Is it a possibility that it will actually be that, and that you will get a market approval based on these studies, or do you see it as more likely that you have to conduct an additional study?
Yeah, I'd say it is not impossible. You never know what happens, but truly, I would say it's our base assumption that we need to do an additional study. So both studies have a comparator arm, if you will. In the Guillain-Barré syndrome study, it's a patient registry where we're putting it's a single arm, if you will, but then comparing to a patient register. In the active arm, we're putting imlifidase on top of IVIG, which is the only approved therapy for Guillain-Barré syndrome, and then we compare to outcomes in patients that have only gotten IVIG. In the AMR study, which is a post-kidney transplant indication, we are comparing to plasma exchange, so on top of standard of care, and then comparing to plasma exchange. But again, the base assumption has to be that we need to do additional studies to get full approval.
Right, right. And just speculating now, how big do you think this will be patient-wise? Would it be similar to the phase 2 studies or larger? Or?
Typically, a study following such studies would be larger. How much larger is difficult to say. Guillain-Barré syndrome, as you just saw, is also a rare disease, so yeah. I don't think it's going to be a very high number.
No, knowing that it's very rare disease, that it shouldn't be like
it's not thousands of patients or no.
I understand. And you have stated that you are in discussions with several other gene therapy companies, other than Sarepta, that you already have. What do you want to see in these deals when you discuss with a partner? Do you want to make the best economic deal as possible, or do you want to enter deals where imlifidase has the best potential of showing a good result, or how is your thinking behind which projects to choose, so to say?
So we see a big potential for imlifidase and potentially other of our enzymes in the gene therapy space, and we have our sight on the long-term kind of broad usage of imlifidase and other enzymes to deal with these neutralizing antibodies, not just to make a broader range of patients eligible for gene therapy, but also to potentially increase or improve the outcome of the gene therapy. Can lower the dose and so on, have fewer side effects. You can potentially increase durability of response and so on. So that's what we're looking at. In order to get there, we need to work with gene therapy companies. They have the assets that are complementary, and so this is why we did the deal with Sarepta. Of course, we will also exploit the fact that from Sarepta, there's a huge value in potentially enabling a broader range of patients to benefit from their therapies, and that's how we created the economics in the deal. Important for us is that we retain control of imlifidase. It's not a standard out-licensing deal. We will book all of the sales of imlifidase, even though Sarepta is in the driver's seat as far as developing it as preconditioning therapy is concerned. And that is important for us also when we talk to other parties. And you can imagine that quite a few would want to take over control and in-license, but we're not interested in that. So we have a range of discussions, but we want to see a clear line forward towards the vision that we have, and that's also why we created a gene therapy franchise internal in the company. And I'm sure we'll do additional deals. Can't say at what point in time and the specific structure of that, but we're very pleased with where we are right now, how far we've come with Sarepta, and excited about the future.
Yeah, great. That's interesting. We actually got some questions from the web, and one person is wondering if you see any risks on seeking commercial collaborations.
Risks?
Yeah.
With Idefirix, I presume that is. We are not seeking collaborations in Europe. As I said, we think we have what it takes to successfully launch, and we'll do that. There are other geographies where it makes sense to share the risk, local risks, and also benefit from the local expertise and network of a partner. Again, based on my experience working with partners all over the world, it is very important that you retain control. You want to make sure that your product has the right priority and focus, and that it's positioned as it should, and that you have the right outcomes. Because if we suddenly, let's say, work with a distributor that is not able to promote it correctly, and you have bad outcomes, that will impact the rest of our business.
Yeah.
So that's a model we're using.
Maybe especially with such an innovative
exactly.
product also.
Exactly.
Maybe it's even more important.
Even more important.
Yeah. And the last question here from the web. Could you just briefly describe your vision as a company?
Well, the vision was on, I think, slide 1 or 2, and also last slide. That really is to create a leading player within rare immunologic diseases, right? I think this is truly exciting. It's so rare in Europe and in Scandinavia that we have the opportunity to build another Election, another Shire, and we have the platform that can do it. I mean, looking at the applicability of our platform across these different universes and what we have already created, I think we have what it takes to as I say, build a leading player in rare diseases. It will take a lot of effort and investment, time and money, but I'm sure we certainly have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, interesting. Was a good question to end all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.